All right, today we're digging into the story of King Asa of Judah. He's this fascinating figure, a ruler whose story is a huge lesson in what can happen when a really, really great start, well, leads to a pretty disastrous end. So what's the deal with King Asa? It's a real puzzle. You see, if you read the Book of Kings, he comes across as this really good king, a guy who does the right thing. But then you get to the chronicler who's writing later and the picture changes. Suddenly, he's this compromised figure, a man who starts out so strong, but his reign just kind of fizzles out in failure and judgment. So how can both of these be true? Well, to figure that out, we've really got to look at his story in two totally different halves.
Okay, so let's start with the good stuff, the first part of his reign. Early on, Asa was this incredibly passionate king, and he had one single mission: to completely purify the worship of God in his kingdom.
His number one enemy was this thing called syncretism, and all that really means is this dangerous blending of different religious beliefs. See, people were trying to mix the worship of God with all these foreign religious practices. And the problem, wasn't just about bringing in new statues. You couldn't just take symbols from other religions and say, oh, they mean something different now. It doesn't work that way. The old meanings, the old associations, they stick around. And for the chronicler who's telling the story, that was a huge problem. It totally compromised the unique holiness of God.
So one of the main things Asa went after was something called the Asherah. And this wasn't just some statue you could knock over. Nope. It was often a whole grove of live trees, a really powerful symbol in the Baal cult that represented a goddess of life. The fact that this was even in Judah just goes to show you how deep this religious mixing had gotten. And listen, Asa didn't mess around. He was decisive. He wasn't just suggesting changes, he was making them happen. He tore down foreign altars, he chopped down those Asherah groves, and he started fortifying his cities. He even made the super risky political move of getting rid of the Queen Mother because she was a bad influence. And to top it all off, he leads this massive ceremony to renew the people's covenant with God, and it was so powerful it even drew people down from the northern tribes. This guy was absolutely on a mission. But cleaning up the kingdom's worship was just one piece of the puzzle. Asa's faith, his real faith, was about to get a massive test on the battlefield. Now, to really get what happens next, you gotta understand the chronicler's pretty unique view on war. For him, having a big, powerful army was great. It was a sign that God was blessing the king. But, and this is the most important part, that army, it never actually wins the war. Not on its own. The victory always, always comes down to one thing: whose side God is on. And that brings us to his first big test, a war against an enemy named Zerah the Nubian. The chronicler lays it out so clearly for us. Asa's military strategy? Totally irrelevant. What mattered was this: Asa relied on God, God won the battle, and Asa got to collect the spoils. It's a simple, powerful formula, right? Faith equals victory. And we're not talking about a small skirmish here. The threat was absolutely massive. I mean, the sources say Zerah's army had 1 million soldiers. 1 million! Faced with that kind of overwhelming force, Asa's only real hope was to put all his trust in God. So his victory, it wasn't just a win, it was a flat-out miracle. And it proved his faith was in the right place. But, and there's always a but in stories like this, that faith wasn't gonna last. Because, like I said, Asa's story really is a tale of two halves. After this absolutely incredible victory built on pure faith, things take a turn, a dark turn. The righteous reformer we just met, well, he starts to compromise. The real turning point happens during this long, brutal war he has with King Baasha of Israel. This is the conflict that shows us a major shift in Asa's whole character. And it's also where the chronicler gets a little, let's say, creative with the timeline to make a really powerful point about faith and consequences. Okay, check this out, because this is fascinating. If you look at the history in the Book of Kings, King Baasha was actually dead and gone long before the 35th year of Asa's reign. So why would the chronicler move the date? It's totally intentional. By putting Asa's biggest failure, his decision to trust a foreign alliance instead of God, right up against the end of his life, the chronicler forges this unbreakable link. He's showing us cause and effect. The sin and the judgment are now tied directly together. It's a masterful bit of storytelling. And you can see the difference so clearly right here. It's night and day. Against that massive Nubian army, total trust in God. But against Baasha, he reads the temple treasure to buy himself a foreign ally. After the first war, a prophet praises him, and what does he do? He leads a national revival. After the second war, a prophet calls him out for his bad choices, and Asa throws the guy in prison. The outcomes? Well, they really do speak for themselves. You go from a miraculous divine victory to unending, grinding conflict. So where does that leave us? What's the final verdict on King Asa, at least according to the chronicler? It's a pretty sobering conclusion, and it's meant to be a warning for every leader who came after him. You know, the Book of Kings just casually mentions that near the end of his life, Asa had a disease in his feet. But the chronicler, he sees something much deeper. For him, this isn't just some random sickness. No, it's a divine judgment. It's the direct result, the consequence, of a king who got proud, a king who chose to rely on his own smarts and his own political deals instead of the very God who handed him that miraculous victory in the first place. And that's it, right there. The two sides of King Asa. He starts his reign with humility, he ends it with pride. He goes from purifying worship to making shady alliances, from relying on God to relying on his own wealth. And his story arc follows that path perfectly, from divine victory to divine judgment. For the chronicler, Asa is the textbook example of how a good king can go bad. So what's the big takeaway here? What does the chronicler want us to learn from Asa's life? It's this: being faithful in the past doesn't buy you a free pass for the future. You can't rest on your laurels. A leader's strength isn't about one single decision. It's about consistent humility and a constant reliance on something bigger than yourself. The moment pride takes the wheel, well, disaster is right around the corner. And that really leaves us with this timeless question, doesn't it? One that every single leader still has to wrestle with today. Asa's story kind of forces us to look in the mirror and ask, in our own lives, in our own challenges, where is that line? Where is the line between just using wise, practical strategy and actually showing a dangerous lack of faith in the very principles that got us here in the first place? It's a tough question, and it's just as relevant now as it was thousands of years ago.